Welcome to the Spiritually Embodied Leader podcast. I'm Cynthia Gutierrez, a mom, dancer, dark side trance freak, and the creator of Embodied Ritual. I love to help conscious moms, healers, and highly sensitive people like you regulate your nervous system so you can embody your true essence, align with your higher calling, and finally become the parent you've always dreamed of being. Inside this podcast, we're going to be shining light on the topics of embodiment, subconscious mind, ritual and ceremony, cyclical living, and returning to nature so that you can enjoy life with the fullness of who you are. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's get into it. Hey! Welcome to another episode of the Spiritually Embodied Leader podcast. I am feeling super jazzed and bubbly and excited because mostly because I just got out of a different podcast episode where I was a guest on, and it's just I freaking love podcasting. It's so exciting and so cool to get to talk about all sorts of interesting conversations and topics with other people. And yeah, it feels so cool to be able to be a part of this podcasting ocean with all these other people. And it's very exciting. And something has been on my heart that I'm just dude, I need to talk about this. It came really loud and clear over the weekend when I got to go to his dance show, and I'm going to be going into the details of that. But it's been interesting to notice how okay, there's something that's I'm getting an inkling to talk about something or do something, show up in a particular way. And I'm just okay, but how and when and why? And it's just interesting to see the snowball of hey, it kind of reminds me of, kids might be hey, mom, hey, mom, mommy, ma. I feel like my intuition is like that, where it's just Mom, hey, this thing, it's, talk about it. It's time to do it now. Hello. Okay, come on. And I think part of the reason why I've been hesitating and not too sure, because there are certain things that I kind of get uncomfortable or don't feel ready to talk about when I feel like I haven't fully embodied something, or I'm not I've fallen or I've veered off that path. And even though I'm getting back on it, that oh, I'm not in a place to talk about it yet or something. I don't know. There's this weird story that goes on in my mind that kind of holds me back from certain things. And even though, to be transparent, I am not dancing nearly as much as I used to. And I don't want to say completely, but my relationship with dance and movement has shifted and changed. And I feel like the purpose of it has also shifted and changed from when I was in college doing it to now as a mom and all of this. It's I have been kind of holding myself back on sharing this particular message for this reason. But honestly, it's obvious now, especially since this past weekend, that it's really important to talk about this. And so may this also inspire me to really just dive headfirst into this practice in terms of creative practice, because I know dance was a really big medium as this big ship in my life that carried me through so much and so many rough seas and all of this, and also beautiful sunsets of life. And I just feel like dance was the creative medium that helped me through so much in life. And now that I am exploring different things like drumming and singing and playing with my voice, and also, being a podcast host, just getting comfortable with my voice and all of this, I'm not only turning to dance to help meet those kinds of needs, but I'm also turning to other creative arts that can also meet those needs and other needs that maybe dance can't meet. You know what I mean? But overall, it's the creative arts, and also not just the creative arts, but passions in general. It just so happens that creative arts like dancing and singing and drumming, music, all of that, it just so happens that those type of creative arts is what really lights me up. It really is what brings so much aliveness to myself and my life and my relationships and all of this. So yeah, going back to the weekend, an old professor of mine had started, she's now directing a dance company And some of the dancers are international. Like some of them live down Tijuana, Mexico, which is like right across the border from where I'm at. I'm in San Diego, California. And then I think there's another dancer that's like overseas. I forgot exactly what country she's from, but yeah. And then there's two dancers that live here in San Diego. So they've been getting together and they decided to put on this dance performance. And it's so interesting to notice the things that I like really, really want to experience, where I'm like, dude, I gotta be there. I gotta do this thing. Like, I have this intention to experience this. And it's so interesting to see the sudden shifts and changes in my schedule, the seemingly obstacles that come up in my life. Oh, all of a sudden my partner's unavailable and this and that. And so I really had to go out of my way to like make sure I made it to this dance performance. And I just knew, I'm like, dude, I need to be there. So even with two babysitters that help us like every week, and Cody's mom is here, my mother-in-law, as I like to call her. Cody and I are not like legally married, but like we are very much like in deep commitment to each other. And so like she's not my mother-in-law because we didn't get the law involved, right? Like we're not legally married, but love is surely binding us together. So she's my mother-in-law. Even with her being here, even with all this support, like things came up, my partner's schedule changed and all of this. And like, I even had them change their plans a little bit, their dinner plans, so that I can make it out to this performance. I initially was going to take my daughter with me, yet other things came up too. And so anyway, yes, lots of plans changed and I made my way out and I got to actually be there. And I'm so glad because it just reminded me why I love dance so much. So yes, that night I make it out to the university and I go out to the show. And when I walk in, they're doing this practice and it's like, I'm like, God, this is why I loved that school so freaking much. Cause it's a very postmodern school. Okay. A very contemporary school, very experimental. And they love just like pushing the boundaries and doing things that are out of the realm of the status quo. So anyway, I walk into the studio theater and I see that mostly everyone from the audience is out on stage. And everyone's spread out throughout the area. And my old professor starts leading us into this like grounding embodiment practice to connect with ourselves, connect with the environment, connect with everybody in the space and all of that. And then eventually she leads us into like a partnered dance where we're like at the tips of our finger, like finger to finger with this other person. And there's a leader follower experiment going on. And like we switch roles and then they're like, we share the same role. There is no leader, there is no follower. Or what if you are both? And like, how do you navigate that and all of this? And I even got to dance with a different professor of mine, which was so cool. I was just like, oh my God, you're participating? Awesome. Like, let's do this thing together. And so that was really cool to reconnect with him. And so we have this experience and the whole thing is about like 20 minutes. And then she slowly starts to guide us, like you can eventually, when you both are ready, can make it back into the seats, the chairs to sit down as the audience member to watch the show. But it's like seamless, you know what I mean? Like there's no beginning, there's no end. We're just transitioning. And so some people are in their seats, some audience are still dancing on stage. And then some of the actual performers are like kind of ready, kind of not. Like some of them are in position or some of them are already dancing, even though there's audience members on the stage. And it's just like, God, I just love it. And so there's this transition that happens and then the dance has already begun. And so, I'm just like sitting there laughing sometimes, almost crying sometimes, all this nostalgia is coming through and just like being in awe of this performance was probably like an hour long. And so anyway, they have this whole dance performance and then they invite us after the show to come back out on stage. They bring a bunch of extra chairs to circle around so that we can have like a Q&A session, right? And get more of an in-depth conversation as either for the dance itself, for the company itself, or whatever it is. And so, just as that ends and we're transitioning into that, I see a different professor of mine. I'm just like, hi. And so we connect and we just chat briefly, and then we all take our seats and we start. I didn't ask any questions, but it was so cool to just take in the answers of the dancers, because there were some questions about how they navigate a particular score, meaning, so something that I learned in that school was the practice of kind of dancing within a question. So there's this inquiry practice happening where there's a question, and we allow our body to quote unquote answer the question. Yeah, it's like we're experimenting, we're living into the question, and we're allowing the body and the dance to emerge with the guidance of that question. And so that was part of their dance. I don't know if it was the entire dance, but yeah, just having someone ask about that. And it was a question that was kind of a paradox. And so there's just like, do you ever get to an answer? Or like, how do you know? Not that they were done, but it was just like so interesting to hear, like, how did you navigate that? And just to hear them answer, it helped me kind of reflect back on my experience within that university, because I remember practicing those kinds of questions. And I used to overextend myself or over exaggerate the movement to try to exactly answer the question. And there was a moment where my professor was like, yeah, and we're just failing, while simultaneously doing what we can to answer the question, even though who knows what's right or wrong, but it's just seeing what art, what movement is birthed through that, right? But it was just so cool to just like reflect back as to why I had a lot of conflicting emotions during those practices, because I was like afraid to fail, and it was just like I was trying to overprotect myself and make it seem like, oh, I'm the good student, right? Like I know what I'm doing, and look at me do the thing that you asked me to do. And it was just like, oh, like I could see how I was trying so hard. And I was so afraid of seeing myself get it wrong. And over the years of studying in that school, like I slowly, without even consciously being aware of it, I slowly was dismantling that. I guess it was somewhat of a limiting belief, but it was like this body set. There's body, like a mindset. Well, there's also a body set of how those kinds of beliefs or ways of beings can affect us. And, it may come out as a personality or a characteristic, but all of those things can shift and change, right? And so it was just so cool as to like, oh, like that's where I started from. Like, no wonder I was having such a hard time at the beginning. And then over the years, getting more comfortable and allowing myself to just not know. Just be like, I don't know, but this is what's coming through right now. And I'm okay with that. And like, what else? And that curiosity started to really set in. So anyway, yeah, there was a lot of reflection during that experience of witnessing the performance and hearing in on the conversation. And then after, I got to say thank you and give my professor, who was the director of the company, a hug. And I'm just like, wow, I'm just like re-inspired all over again by dance, by that particular school and the people that are part of it and like that community. And I make my way back to the car. And the moment that I get in the car and shut the door, I just start crying and crying and crying. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that I finally made it out to the performance. And I got back in touch with dance. And I'm just like, God, like I remember, and now I know why dance meant so much to me, and it still does, even though it holds a different purpose in my life now. But regardless, there is a purpose for it in my life. And it's those practices that I want to bring to life for people, or bring back into their lives, because there's a lot of things that we practice as a child, right? Of like pretending and acting or dancing or singing that we did as a child, or painting or whatever it was. Like, there's a reason that when we were so young, that it just lit us up and brought so much joy into our life. And it can be so easy to just lose sight of that and allow life and the mundane and responsibilities, parenthood to kind of derail us and just allow these things to be forgotten. And I think why I feel so called to share about this now is because even though I had like 20 years of dance training, right? It was that aliveness and the way that in which it filled me up. It kept me going back to it. There was a period after I graduated that I didn't dance. I did other things because I was a full-time college student, and I worked 2 to 3 part-time jobs sometimes. Like, I had very little extra time to do other things. So once I graduated, I did yoga teacher training. I started doing like energy healing certifications and all this other stuff that I was like, oh, I can finally do all these things and travel and blah, blah, blah. But once I became a mom, I feel like even when I became pregnant, I started doing yoga. It was like prenatal yoga, but slowly but surely, I started losing sight of my dance practice and losing sight of that connection with my body, even though I felt very deeply connected with my body and my daughter who was growing in my body. It was just like, I'm shifting and changing into something that I have no idea what is to come. And it really scared me. And so I kind of had this somewhat of an identity crisis that happened when I became pregnant. And I felt like I just kind of disconnected from a lot of the creative practices that I was involved in, mostly related to the body, whether it was yoga or dance, some kind of movement. I just really lost sight of that. And I still vividly remember within that first year of motherhood of just completely letting it go, letting go of the yoga, letting go of the dance, just letting everything go. And I felt like I let myself go as well, in the way that like I lost track of who I was. Like, I didn't really know who I was. And if I let go of the identity of being a dancer, it was just like, why the fuck am I even here? Like, what am I meant to do? And even though the only thing instinctively that I knew what to do was be mom, and that's all I had, I was just like, okay, like, I'll just focus on this. But I felt like I lost myself within that. And I think it really started to freak me out when I totally just accepted the mom role and I just was dedicated to only that, that I became really unsatisfied. Like, I was just like, oh my God, like, I can't fucking do this every day, every moment of every day, all the time. Like, I need to do something else or else I'm going to fucking lose it. And I did many, 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 many times. Panic attacks. Like, I was very depressed. I probably had postpartum depression, but like back then, I didn't talk to anyone about it. But, you know, Cody could tell you, he remembers like me just like hyperventilating or just completely having a freak out moments, you know. It was just really troubling for me to be so unsatisfied and becoming resentful and just like, oh my God, I'm fucking pulling my hair out. Like, I need to be someone else other than mom, right? Like, I don't want to be this caretaker all the time. And so right after Lily's first birthday, I just had this really big desire to start my own business. And it led me down to what Embodied Ritual is now today. And it's been really interesting to notice how dance keeps popping back into my life. Like, from graduating college to today, seeing the various ways that I like let go of dance, completely surrendered it, like tried to forget about it literally. And then it re-entering my life in various ways and just being like, and then focusing on other things, and doing other certifications and this and that, right? It's so cool to see how, even though dance is not a part of my life in the way that it used to be, it's still very clear to me that it is part of my deeper purpose. And I'm still figuring that out. But regardless, I know that when I dance and when I do these things that light me up, because it's not just dance anymore. That's another cool thing, is that I'm really starting to play with like drum, like the frame drum, and singing medicine songs. Like drumming and singing, music, like getting back in touch with the creative arts. Maybe that's painting for you, maybe that's acting for you, or comedy or something like that. Like it might also not just be like performing arts. It could be arts and crafts, or you know what I mean? Like there is these practices that are a part of our lives that really light us up or bring peace within our lives. But it's those practices that bring so much more aliveness and richness and fullness into our lives that I just want to remind us to remember. I just want to encourage you to get back in touch with it. Yeah. Because even though it may not be related to business or your career or your job or parenting or whatever, like if you're having relationship issues, it may not be related to that, but there is a reason that there is so much aliveness that comes through it for you. And honestly, I have been kind of, side eyeing myself in terms of this like shadow work. It's very important, okay? Before I move on any longer, shadow work and just reprogramming my subconscious mind and healing myself has brought so much freedom into my life. And at the same time, I want to say beware, beware, because sometimes when we're so deep down in that rabbit hole of shadow work and healing our traumas and taking a deep look into ourselves and like the things that may be holding us back in all of this, sometimes we get so deep into that shadowy aspects of ourselves that we lose sight of the bliss, we lose sight of the joy, we lose sight of the things that bring so much life back into our lives. And so I'm kind of playing with the idea of allowing these creative arts and these passion projects or whatever it is, these things that light you up. What if we allow those things to be part of the healing process? What if it's those passionate practices and experiences that actually help us become more resilient? Yeah, it brightens us up. It makes us stronger. It keeps us connected to our higher selves and that deeper drive for life. And yeah, I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to stop doing like the shadow work and taking a deep look into my subconscious and all of this. But also I'm just like, dude, what about celebration of life? You know, what about like doing the things that really make us happy? Because even that can also take us so far, so far. That is also another reason why I really wanted to bring this up. Because look, I'm just noticing that the more that I'm looking for my shadows and I don't want to say what's wrong with me. I mean, it could feel that way, right? But just like trying to always find something to fix, I feel like it just begets more of that, right? It's like we have those goggles on and it's all we see. And so it's like, it's how I'm constantly relating to myself and the world. And if I continue to go down that path, that's all I'm really just manifesting more of into my life. So I'm like, dude, I just want to be joyous. I just want to be happy. I just want to do things that light me up and make time and space for me to be my own person and have my own interests. Then I'm going to focus on the things that actually do that, right? And the more that I do that, it's like I start to feel that well. And so I can then do both. And it's beautiful because I feel like it broadens my capacity to actually go deeper in both of those directions, where I have that aliveness and the passion and that resiliency to be able to then go into deeper depths within myself and to do deeper healing and all of that, right? But I gotta have that brightness. I kind of think of it as like, what's coming to my mind right now is this kind of a sphere where the bottom half of the sphere is like the underground, right? It's like the subterranean level, and then like the shadow work. There's like it's just like the darkness. But then there's above ground and the grass and trees and the sun and nature and the daylight. there's that beautiful contrast of the two. And I know that if I am spending way too much time in like the depth of the soil and the darkness and the cold, and it's just like all I know and see is within that darkness, and I don't ever come up for that light, for that rejuvenation and that upliftment and just living life to the fullest, like that's when I know I'm like, okay, I need to take a break from down under. Like I need to pull myself out of those deep rabbit holes and just go live. And I feel like dance was part of that kind of pulling me out of those deep, dark rabbit holes in my life, at least through like childhood and adolescent years, all the way up until I became a mom. And so now I'm still kind of finding my way back in, like, where do I go from here? So yeah, I felt really called to share this because, even though like it may seem like, okay, like me doing a 5-10 minute dance in the living room may not be related to, the issues I might have in my relationship or the parenting struggles that I'm experiencing or feeling really down and out for a whole week or something like that. Like, even though it may not seem like directly related to these situations, I know, and I've experienced it for myself, that when I do these things that light me up, whether it's drumming and singing or dancing or whatever it is, being out in nature, like it really does make an impact. It really does make a difference. I feel like my cup is full and overflowing even. It's like, oh, I then become even more resourceful. I even open up to other solutions and all of these things that could also help. And another thing that I really want to say is like, see it for yourself, like see it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. See what getting back in touch with your passions and the things that light you up, or something, maybe it's something new and you're like, I've actually been thinking about this thing and like, I've never done it before and I don't know why it's coming up now, but like, I want to do it. Like, see for yourself what that does for you. How does that feed you? Yeah. How does that meet your needs in ways that other things couldn't? Like, what does that make possible for you? Let's go and find out. I'm like really curious as to what that is for you. Like, if you want to pop in the DMs and let me know, that'd be so cool. Like, what really lights you up? What are you passionate about? Or what's something that like, you're like, I don't know why I want to do this thing all of a sudden, but like, it's just coming up for me. Like, I would love to know what that is. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. Yeah, I felt like this topic has been on my heart so long, and I felt like I like let it bubble up so much that like now that I finally said something, like I just like blah, like I just kind of let it all spray out. Anyway, yes, thank you so much for tuning in. It's always such a pleasure to be able to do this with you. And if you'd like to connect some more, you can find me on Instagram at Embodied Ritual. Of course, all the links and things are in the show notes. And yeah, I hope you have a beautiful day. All right, go have some fun. Go do something creative. Go light yourself up. Get into your passions and enjoy. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in. May this show continue to awaken the spiritually embodied leader within you. If you enjoyed this episode and you want others to enjoy it too, then take a screenshot, share it on your stories, and tag me at Embodied Ritual. Now, if you'd really like to support me in helping more people, please rate this show and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again. Let's connect soon.